All right, 19 days away, Nebraska UTEP. Evan Bland of the World-Herald joins us. Good morning.
Morning, guys.
Hey, let's first start, before we talk about Nebraska, let's talk about what happened in Boulder on Friday. We've all had moments with coaches, and whether it be football coaches, basketball coaches, where maybe they pulled us aside or they have reached out to us about something we said or we read. That was a very contentious press conference from a newspaper reporter to a television reporter. What would have been the right way for the head coach at Colorado to handle that situation, in your opinion?
Well, I think you could break it down into some of the different examples that he put out there. I mean, the thing about the CBS affiliate thing, like, I think most coaches understand that whatever goes on at the national level, whatever they may be writing on a site there, has nothing to do with the local guy who, and I guess it sounds like that CBS is like their local sponsor too.
Yep.
So, that's not a great look. You probably want to talk to that guy to the side and maybe express that you didn't appreciate how the national site treated you in whatever bit of coverage you have an issue with, and then maybe you just make clear, hey, we're not gonna let that happen here. I think that maybe would be the healthier way to pull that off. And then the thing with Sean Keeler, at the Post there, I think they must have some history there. I know Sean a little bit, and just kind of the way that he writes can be very pointed and direct at times, and some coaches take issue with that. So that sounded like it was something that was maybe the culmination of a lot of little things as opposed to one big thing. But if you're the head coach at Colorado, like, I don't know that you can afford to get yourself caught up in stuff like that. It came off as petty. It came off as distracted. It came off as, I don't know, apprehensive a little bit maybe. And that's what people are going to talk about coming out of that conference, right, wrong, or otherwise. Any point, if you're Deion Sanders, that you're trying to get across, people are talking about those interactions. They're talking about just kind of some bizarre corrections of phrases that were being asked of him. I think the one about bolstering the offensive line, and he says, let's just say improved, or there's another one or two as well, but it just felt very nitpicky, tense. And I mean, that's not the tone you want to set before you play the game while you're early in fall camp. And these are people you're going to be interacting with for the next few months, no matter how things go. So maybe a sign of kind of how things are going internally right now, but not what you're looking, the tone you're looking to set at this point.
Yeah. You said where my mind was when I heard that. And that is, we saw the Athlon article. There's been a lot of questions since about just the overall program culture. And when you have a very defiant press conference where you're literally denying any type of questions to be answered based on certain reasons, agendas that make very little sense to people, I'm in that mindset of this is maybe getting to Deion Sanders. And I think what's going to be interesting, Evan, and I know it's obviously not the beat you or any of us are covering, but it's always around us because it's Deion Sanders and it's Colorado, and we know what that's been. It just seems like this is going to be interesting to see how this team is out of the gate, because if that was any indication, it seems like it's at least having some type of toll on Deion Sanders. Maybe this is just part of the keeping receipts, chip on the shoulder that they like to play, but this seemed different than it did last year.
Yeah, it seemed like the showman wasn't coming out for this one. He kept his sunglasses on. It felt more raw, I suppose, and chippy. And, you've kind of heard of some of these characteristics of Deion, especially when he's coaching in high school or working with high school players. And the first year at Colorado, it was kind of that honeymoon phase, especially the start of it. And you're on national television commercials before, you've played any games. And so the shine was very much there. And I think just the reality of the grind of trying to compete in major college football can wear anybody down, even somebody with seemingly endless energy like Deion, when you're constantly in the portal or retaining your own players or raising NIL funds or whatever it might be. You can just tell there's this kind of a wearing down effect on what he's going through right now. And so, I mean, I think it also is reflective of the fact that he hasn't been a coach in a major program before, because the general fan has no interest in beefs between coaches and local media. Like they want to see how their team's doing. They want them to play well, and they want to hear what's going on. And so to kind of divert that into a sideshow is off-putting, I think, to general fan base, and sort of additionally undercuts some of the efforts that you're trying to make to promote your school and to raise funds and things like that. So, maybe they come out strong and this all becomes sort of a blip on the radar. But I think it's just as possible that this is maybe, a little bit of foreboding about what season might be in store here for Colorado.
Hey, let's read some body language. Because Corcoran will be back today, or scheduled to be back today. So on the open practice on Friday, and then in the scrimmage, you got a Gunnar Gatula, and then you got a Grant Segrin. So you got two Nebraska guys that are replacing a Nebraskan that got injured, but one guy from Class A, another guy from C2, and then there's Turner Corcoran. Read me the vibe that you got from Matt Rhule, Evan, on how he talked about Gatula, but that position in general after the injury a week ago today to Teddy.
I think they realize that they have some guys that they like long term, but that you want to keep Turner healthy. And I think when you lose a guy like Teddy, it does put into focus a little bit more the fact that you don't have a ton of depth there. And so, like, as we saw at the open practice last week, and as it played out in the scrimmage, like, they're getting as many reps to a guy like Gatula and Segrin as they can, because those guys maybe weren't in their immediate plans for this season right away, and now they are with Teddy going down. And so you want to keep Corcoran as healthy as you can, and he's still coming off of his own foot injury and things that's kind of been limiting him off and on really since the end of last season. And so I think you still feel pretty good about what he gives you. I think he was vying to be the starter even before Teddy went down. But beyond that, again, you can kind of, look behind you on the depth chart and say, man, I like what Gatula and Segrin can be down the road, but game two in the third quarter, I mean, maybe. But I think there's a sense that they really need to see what those guys can do now, stack as many reps as you can at this point, and then hope everybody stays healthy. And if they don't, maybe you have to get creative with the offensive line and move some guys around a little bit more. But it's a manageable situation, but it's one now where I think Nebraska realizes you just can't afford any more injuries at that spot if you want to perform at the level you're hoping to on the line.
Evan, what you heard from the practice on Saturday in the 128 play scrimmage was, I guess we say, mixed. Turnovers were happening with the quarterbacks, but there was a sense of calmness with Matt Rhule. If you're in that situation and you're hoping for best case scenario for Nebraska, what do you want to hear at this level or this stage of fall camp? What do you want to hear assessment-wise from a scrimmage? Or what do you think that the most optimistic outlook would be if you're hearing what from the head coach?
Well, I think it would be you'd be hearing the things that they've been looking to get from certain positions all spring. I think it would, or all fall, I should say. I think it would be like you need to hear that the running backs are making explosive plays, that they're, maybe somebody peeled off a 60-yard touchdown run, or somebody made something out of nothing and broke something off. I think it would be that the quarterbacks took care of the football, and maybe there were some takeaways or some turnovers, but they weren't, mental mistakes or things like that. And then I think defensively, it would be there were some takeaways. Hey, somebody in the secondary made a really good individual play, or somebody on the defensive line broke through for a strip sack. I think those are the things that, Nebraska has identified many times as like that next step for this team in those different areas. And so I think you got a little bit of that on Saturday, maybe not a ton. And, there were no specifics when it came to the quarterbacks. You kind of heard some general assessments of how they played. But there really was there were no names put out there as sort of standouts at those positions. And then you hope that everyone stays healthy. And I know they had a couple minor injuries occur there, or injuries to reserve players. But, I think the other thing that I keep thinking of that Matt Rhule has said is at this point, everybody kind of knows the schemes. They know where to go with the football. It's about how do you respond in those tough moments, that adversity spot. And as we know, that's been the major struggle for Nebraska when when something happens in a game, they crack and they break, and that's happened a lot. And so I think the ability to respond to that and to rise up, to shake it off, and to come back stronger would be that next step. And I think they're seeing a little bit of that, but probably not even to the degree that they're hoping for right now.
Evan Bland of the World-Herald joining us. Let's go back to running backs, because there was a play in the scrimmage on Saturday where Gabe Ervin got Deshaun Singleton one-on-one. And we know Singleton's physical enough that he'll get up to the line of scrimmage and he'll fill a hole in run help. And he put his head in there, and Ervin basically ran right through him. And so people are like, oh boy, here we go again. Gabe has been known to do that. Before, E.J. Barthel was talking about his running backs and kind of breaking down, okay, if this guy is the starter, he's done these three things. Do we, on the other side, obsess too much about who RB1 is compared to what Nebraska looks at it internally?
Probably. Yeah, I think that's fair to say. They didn't seem, the coaches, Barthel and Rhule and so on, they don't seem overly concerned with having one feature back step out. And, you hear it a lot in the last year, like, sure, if that guy emerged, that one dominant star, like you're going to take that and run with that. But like, I think there's a realization that that's maybe not this group, that if you do have 4 guys, if you throw in Dante Dowdell, that can contribute and help win you games in October and November and have that depth. I think the depth is important, certainly from an injury standpoint, but I think this group of guys, they all have kind of their own skill sets too. I mean, Ramirez, the straight line speed guy, Irvin's sort of the muscle. Emmett Johnson can make some plays out of the backfield and make you miss a little bit more. And, Dowdell's a little bit bigger, between the tackles presence. So like they all have kind of their own little superpowers. And I think, we talk about trying to improve that room and finding that guy for the first time in a while. Like, I still am of the belief that if the offensive line does what it looks like it can do as a veteran group still, and if the threat of the pass coming from Dylan Raiola and so forth is really there, then like that's going to maybe account for some of that difference that you're looking for anyway. So like, even if the running back group stays relatively similar to what it's been, but defenses can't stack the box, and the offensive line is a group of 22 and 23-year-olds creating running lanes for you, then I think all of a sudden you're in a better situation there anyway. So at this point, maybe it's more beneficial to Nebraska to have 3 or 4 guys that it can trust with those components around it, as opposed to, one dominant running back who's kind of trying to make do with some other issues along the offensive line. So I think it can be a strength for Nebraska as much in the sense of what's around it as it is within the group. And then you have, I think the individual stories are compelling too, with a guy like Ervin trying to stay healthy, and Ramir Johnson in his 6th year trying to prove himself, and Emmett Johnson trying to hold on to his job. So like, there are a lot of really compelling individual storylines, but I do think within the context of the team and the offense in particular, it's a group that can still improve on what it did, even if the individual pieces aren't all that much better.
Evan, I know Matt Rhule said this on Saturday, but just being around the team over the last week, a year ago, we couldn't help ourselves in talking to a player. Second, third question in would be about the dorms, would be about that part of camp. Seems like there was a lot less about that. I know Matt Rhule said he wants it more about the football, the situations, and not necessarily the things that are happening, as the team's building culture. Did you get that sense from the players this week as well? Kind of in lockstep with the head coach that, yeah, that's what we're doing, but we're not really talking about it as much because we know we got bigger things than just establishing the culture in front of us?
Yeah, totally. I mean, it's a year 2 conversation versus a year 1 conversation. Yeah. And we got all that out last year, and there was a novelty to it at the time. The players hadn't done it. What's it like, and pranks and all this. And yeah, I mean, it kind of felt this year like it's been done. There's an understanding for why it's being done, and like let's talk about the stuff that's more important, the stuff that's quite honestly a lot more pressing and urgent when it comes to figuring out roles and looking at what the season can be moving forward. So I think there's a lot of examples of that right now where you're not talking about different standards that are being set or something different about this staff from the previous staff. Like we figured that out, and the players know what the standard is. I think that's one of the more interesting realities of this season is like you heard it all the time in the spring, you heard it at media days, and here in the fall where it's like a year ago, players are kind of tiptoeing through this thing because they didn't know what the standard was from coaches, what they were being expected to do or why they were doing this or that, and now they do. And so I think it comes back to like this idea that it's not about kind of what you do, the schemes of the moment, the X's and O's, or even the culture piece. It's about figuring it out in the moment and finding a way to win and kind of talking football at a 200 level or 300 level or beyond. And I think Nebraska is getting to that point. They certainly have a veteran group of guys now that are leading this team that are clear leaders. I think that's probably one of the things that we'll get out of this week is those single-digit jersey numbers. I know Matt Rhule said they were voting on that here sometime early this week. So that maybe becomes another one of our kind of annual Blackshirts questions about when the single digit jersey stuff comes out. But I think they have a lot of candidates this year, and that speaks, I think, all the more to the fact that the guys who are here really are bought in to the process, and it's manifesting on the field.
Absolutely. Evan, we appreciate it as always. Have a good week.
Thanks, guys. See you.
That's Evan Bland from the World-Herald.